Obi was one of the most successful yam farmers in OD village. His barns were always full, and his farmland stretched far into the bush. But his wealth made him proud and mean. At the weekly market, he would make fun of poor people who couldn't afford to buy many things. He lived in a big mud house with a zinc roof while others had thatch roofs, and he never stopped bragging about it. One hot afternoon during the harvest season, Obi was showing off his new motorcycle at the village square. That's when he saw 3 old women walking with their baskets of herbs. Everyone in the village knew they were not just ordinary women who lived in a small hut by the stream, where they made medicine for sick people. The 3 old women were respected healers in the village. They wore simple wrappers and walked slowly because of their age. When they passed by Obi's new motorcycle, he started laughing loudly. Look at these poor old women, still walking in the sun when they should have been rich from all their fake medicine. The whole market went quiet. Even the goats stopped bleeding. One of them tapped her walking stick on the ground 3 times. The sunny sky suddenly turned dark. She shook her head sadly and pointed at Obi. "You mock us because we are old," they said in a voice that made everyone shiver. "You will learn what it means to be laughed at. For 9 moons, you will carry a child in your belly, and no one will be able to heal you." The next morning, Obi woke up feeling very sick. His belly was making funny noises, and he kept running to the bush to vomit. His wife Betty was worried. Obi didn't even remember the 3 women cursing him the day before. When he looked in his small mirror, he noticed his strong farmer's belly was getting rounder. In the evening, when he went to drink palm wine with his friends at Dan's palm wine shop, people were talking about what the 3 sisters had said. Some people were already laughing behind his back. For the first time, Obi felt shame creep into his heart. "They don't know what they are saying," he muttered. Some weeks passed, and now Obi couldn't hide his condition anymore. His belly grew bigger each day, and the morning sickness got worse. Betty, his wife, didn't know whether to be worried or angry. She had seen the 3 sisters curse with her own eyes, but such a thing had never happened in OD village before. Word spread fast, carried by market women and children running between compounds. Soon, even people from nearby villages were coming to see the man with the growing belly. They came to stare and whisper. Chief Dan called a meeting at his palace. All the elders came, wearing their best clothes and holding their walking sticks. Even Obi's father, who hadn't left his compound in 3 farming seasons, came to speak for his son. The palace was full of people sitting on wooden stools and mats. "This is not a small matter," Chief Dan said, his voice deep and serious. "The 3 sisters have lived by our stream for many years, healing our sick and helping our women give birth. Obi has shown them great disrespect." The elders nodded, their faces stern. Someone would have to go to the sisters' hut to beg for forgiveness. Obi and Betty walked through the bush path to see the old herbalist, who lived at the edge of the next village. The sun was hot, and Obi had to stop many times to rest. His big belly made it hard to walk fast. Betty held his hand, something she had never done in public before. The herbalist's compound was filled with drying herbs and pots of bubbling medicine. He looked at Obi's belly and shook his head. "This is not ordinary medicine work," he said. "The 3 sisters' power is very strong. Only a true change in your heart can break this curse." Every week, Obi had to face the crowded market. Women selling yams and fish would point and laugh. "See the proud man now," they would say. "His belly is bigger than my own, and I'm carrying twins." Children made up songs about him, singing them as they played in the evening. But something strange was happening to Obi. Instead of getting angry like before, he started feeling sad. He remembered how he used to laugh at people who couldn't afford nice things. Now he understood how it felt to be the one people laughed at. One night, Betty woke up to find Obi sitting up in bed. His face twisted in a strange way. "I need unripe mango with palm oil and dried fish," he whispered, looking embarrassed. It was midnight and the moon was high. Betty couldn't believe her ears. Obi had always made fun of pregnant women and their strange food requests. But the craving was so strong that Obi couldn't sleep. He kept tossing and turning until Betty had to go wake up her friend Sarah, who had a mango tree in her compound. The whole village soon heard about how the proud Obi was now eating odd combinations of food at midnight. Things got worse at Dan's palm wine shop, where Obi used to spend his evenings. The sweet palm wine that he loved now made him sick. Instead, he started craving Mary's special Zobo drink, which he had always called women's drink before. Now he would sit at the shop with a big cup of Zobo, while other men drank their palm wine and tried not to laugh. At the market, Obi started stopping at food stalls he had never visited before. He would buy roasted corn and coconut one minute, then crave pear and groundnuts the next. The market women who used to fear his sharp tongue now watched in amazement as he mixed palm kernel soup with ripe pawpaw. Obi woke up one midnight, crying for suya with extra pepper. Betty reminded him that the only suya seller in Od Musa had gone to visit his family up north. Obi started crying real tears, something she had never seen before. By the 4th month, Obi's belly had grown so big that he couldn't bend down to harvest his yams anymore. His wrapper was barely tied around his waist, and he had to start wearing Betty's loose dresses at home. The village tailor, whom Obi had once mocked for being too slow, now had to make him special clothes that would fit his growing stomach. Each morning, Obi needed help to get up from the bed. His back hurt, his feet were swollen, and he felt tired all the time. Betty watched her proud husband turn into a helpless man who needed support just to walk to their backyard toilet. One hot afternoon, while Obi was complaining about his aching back, Betty finally had enough. She stood in their compound, hands on her hips, her voice shaking with anger. "For years I begged you to be kind," she said. "Remember when you laughed at Mama Sarah when she was pregnant with twins? You said she was as big as an elephant." Obi sat on a wooden stool, his huge belly making it hard to find a comfortable position. Betty continued, "You mocked pregnant women, you insulted the 3 sisters, you made fun of everyone in this village. Now look at you. Even with your own big belly, you still haven't learned to be truly sorry." The next morning, Betty packed her things in a gonna-must-go bag. The whole compound was quiet except for the chickens pecking in the dirt. "I can't stay with a man who doesn't know how to respect others," she said. "Now you will know how it feels to be pregnant and alone, just like all those women you laughed at when their husbands traveled." Obi sat on their veranda, his belly so big he couldn't even get up to stop her. He watched as Betty walked down the road, heading to her mother's house in the next village. For the first time in his life, he felt truly alone. The same neighbors he had mocked now watched from their compounds as his wife left him. That night, Obi lay on his bed alone, feeling his big belly move in strange ways. He thought about all the mean things he had said to people over the years. He remembered laughing at other people. Now he was the one people pointed at and whispered about. His house felt empty without Betty. There was no one to help him up when he needed to use the toilet at night. No one to make him the strange food combinations he craved. No one to rub his aching back. In the quiet darkness, Obi finally began to understand the pain he had caused others with his cruel words. Obi sat in his big empty house, staring at the pile of dirty clothes in the corner. His wrappers needed washing, but his belly was now so big he couldn't bend over the washing basin. The mere thought of walking to the stream made his feet swell even more. He could see other women washing and laughing at the stream from his window, but his pride kept him inside. Every morning, he would try to sweep his compound, bending awkwardly with his big belly, taking breaks every few minutes. The neighbors could hear him panting and grunting, but Obi would straighten up and pretend to be fine whenever anyone passed by. Inside, he was crying for help, but his mouth couldn't form the words. Cooking became Obi's biggest challenge. One evening, as he tried to prepare EBA for dinner, he couldn't stand close enough to the pot because of his belly. The hot water splashed on his arm, making him cry out in pain. The gari turned lumpy, nothing like the smooth EBA Betty used to make. He sat on his kitchen floor, hungry and hurt, but still too proud to ask for help. His neighbor, Mama Joy, whom he once called lazy for asking her children to fetch water, heard him crying. She stood at her door wanting to help, but remembered how Obi had humiliated her last harvest season. Still, she could smell the burnt soup and hear his quiet sobs through the mud walls. The weekly market became a test of endurance. Obi needed food, but carrying the market basket with his big belly was impossible. He tried balancing a small basket on his head like the women did, but he kept losing his balance. People watched as he dropped his yams 3 times on the dusty road, but when anyone stepped forward to help, he would wave them away. "I can manage," he would say. His voice strained, even as he struggled to pick up fallen tomatoes without squashing them against his protruding belly. Inside, he was thinking about Betty, wondering if she was at the same market, wondering if she could see him struggling. Nights became the hardest. When he needed to use the bush toilet, he had to feel his way in the dark, too ashamed to call the night watchman for help with his lantern. One night, he slipped in the mud and lay there for almost an hour, his pride fighting with his need to shout for help. The moon watched as he struggled to get up, his wrapper covered in mud. Each night he would lie awake, composing apologies in his head, to Betty, to the 3 sisters, to everyone he had hurt. But when morning came, his pride would build its walls again. "Obi doesn't beg," he would tell himself, even as his belly grew heavier and his tasks grew harder. After falling in his kitchen for the 3rd time that week, Obi finally decided to swallow his pride. His back was aching terribly, and he couldn't get the mud stains out of his only clean wrapper. He chose to ask James, a farmer who lived 3 compounds away, for help. James had always laughed at Obi's jokes about others, so Obi thought he would understand. In the early morning, before most of the village was awake, Obi walked slowly to James's compound. Each step was hard, and his pregnant belly seemed heavier than all the yams he had ever harvested. His heart beat fast as he knocked on James's door. "Look who's here," James shouted when he saw Obi. The mighty Obi, the man with the biggest stomach in the whole village. James called his wife to come and see. "Remember how he said you walked like a duck? Now look at him. He's waddling worse than any duck I've ever seen." Obi stood there, his eyes on the ground, as James's loud voice drew other neighbors out of their houses. "The great Obi needs help," James continued, his voice dripping with cruel joy. "Maybe if you roll like a barrel, you can clean your compound better." People started laughing, some even making waddling gestures. With tears burning in his eyes, Obi turned to leave, but his pregnancy made him move slowly. He could hear James calling after him, "Don't forget to shake your bell like those pregnant women you used to mock." Each word felt like a hot needle in Obi's heart. The same words he used to throw at others were now coming back to him. As he walked home, children ran behind him singing, Obi Bell, walking like a drum." He remembered how he used to laugh when these same children sang about other pregnant women. Now he understood the pain of each step, each laugh, each pointing finger. His first try at asking for help had turned into his biggest humiliation yet. After the humiliation from James, Obi's father, Papa Obi, came to visit. The old man found his son crying on his mat, unable to even sit up properly because of his huge belly. Papa Obi, leaning on his walking stick, looked at his son with sad eyes. "My son," he said softly, "sometimes we must crawl before we learn to walk with wisdom." The next morning, Obi and his father started their slow walk to the old women's hut by the stream. Obi had to stop many times, his belly heavy and his feet swollen. Papa Obi waited patiently, remembering how his son used to walk so proudly through the village. Now he watched Obi struggle with each step, holding his back and breathing heavily. Children who usually mocked Obi stayed quiet when they saw him walking with his father. Even the market women stopped their chatter. There was something about seeing the proud Obi walking slowly beside his elderly father that made everyone pause. The old women's hut was small but neat, with herbs drying on strings outside. They sat on low stools, as if they had been expecting the visitors. Obi's father spoke first, his voice respectful. "My sisters, we come with a heavy heart and a heavy belly." Obi tried to greet them but couldn't manage with his belly. Instead, he started crying, real tears rolling down his cheeks. "Please," he begged, "take this curse away. Can't continue like this. I'll give you all my yams, my goats, anything." One of the old women shook her head slowly. "Obi," she said, "even we cannot remove this curse. The power to end it lies within your own heart. All your yams and goats mean nothing if your heart remains proud and cruel." Another added, "We've watched you these past months. You cry because you're uncomfortable, not because you truly understand the pain you caused others. You want the curse lifted, but have you really changed inside?" The last one stood up and touched Obi's belly. "This curse will end when you learn to feel others' pain as your own. When you understand that every person deserves respect, whether they are rich or poor, young or old. When your heart truly changes, only then will this belly go away." Obi's father nodded wisely. He had known this would be the answer, but his son needed to hear it from the old women themselves. Obi stood there, one hand on his huge belly, finally understanding that all his money and pride meant nothing. The walk back was quiet. Obi thought about every person he had mocked, every cruel word he had spoken. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his own discomfort. Instead, he remembered the faces of people he had hurt, the pregnant women he had laughed at, the poor farmers he had insulted, his kind wife Betty who had tried to teach him better. That night, Obi lay on his mat, feeling the weight of more than just his belly. He realized that his real problem wasn't the pregnancy. It was the hardness of his heart. Money and success had made him forget his own humble beginnings, made him think he was better than others. The next morning, Obi started his day differently. When Mama Joy's daughter came to fetch water, he asked her to help him clean his compound. Instead of feeling ashamed, he accepted the help with gratitude. The curse didn't end that day or the next, but something had started to change in Obi's heart, and that was the real beginning of his healing. Word reached Betty about Obi's visit to the three sisters. Her mother told her how Obi and his father had been seen walking slowly by the stream, Obi's belly now so big he could barely move. That night, Betty couldn't sleep. She remembered the proud man she had married, and how different he looked now when she secretly watched him struggling in the market. The next morning, she quietly returned to peek into their compound. She found Obi trying to cook soup, tears in his eyes as he struggled to cut vegetables. Obi started his journey of asking for forgiveness. His first stop was James's compound, the man who had mocked him so cruelly. Despite people laughing, Obi stood there, his big belly in front of him, and spoke from his heart. "I was wrong to laugh at your wife," he said. "Now I know the pain of every step, every stare, every cruel word." To everyone's surprise, James's wife was the first to forgive him. She remembered her own difficult pregnancy and saw the truth in Obi's eyes. Betty, watching from afar, felt her heart soften as she saw her husband humble himself before those he had once mocked. At the busy market square, Obi asked the market women to listen to him. Standing there with his huge belly, he apologized for every mean word he had ever said about their goods, their appearance, their poverty. Some women laughed at him, others turned away. But old Mama Rose saw something different in his eyes. "This man is not the same Obi who mocked my overripe tomatoes," she declared. "Look at his eyes. They are the eyes of someone who has learned to see with his heart." Her words made others look at Obi differently. Despite his condition, Obi started helping others in whatever way he could. He would sit on his veranda and teach young children how to count their market money. He would share his food with hungry neighbors, even if it meant going without. Slowly, the village began to accept his change. Betty moved back home quietly one evening, saying nothing. She found Obi had kept her side of the bed clean. One night after Betty returned, Obi felt terrible pain in his belly. Betty held his hand as he cried, not from the pain, but from genuine remorse. "I understand now," he whispered. "Every person deserves respect. Every person has value. Why did it take me so long to learn this?" The next morning, Obi woke up feeling strangely light. Betty's scream made him jump. His belly was normal again. He ran outside, touching his flat stomach in disbelief. He was so happy he almost cried. When Obi passed the three sisters at the stream that day, they nodded at him. "The curse wasn't in your belly," one of them said softly. "It was in your heart. And now your heart is free." For the first time, Obi saw them not as old women, but as wise teachers who had given him the most valuable lesson of his life. Betty would smile, watching her husband share his yams with poor families, knowing that the curse had given her a better man than she had married. And sometimes when Obi passed by the stream, he would touch his belly and remember. A lesson learned through 9 months of humility, forever changing his heart.
Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of African folktales. If you enjoyed this story, let me know by leaving a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to African Stories by Ace and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next tale. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and remember, every story holds a lesson.